Hello, everybody. This is going to be fun. I'm glad to have the opportunity to share something with you in your class. So we'll begin as soon as we can get our slides up and then start. All right.
What is that thing?
What I decided to do was a presentation dealing with the ethnic groups of Liberia. But first, I want to say this, with this research that I did, there were a couple of people that I had to consult about certain things. So one of them wanted me to focus on one thing before we get into this concept of ethnic groups and tribes. In Africa, we know that a lot of the nations are colonialized and have been set with borders with for reasons for natural resources that were needed for certain countries. So the terminology that we use for these individual groups as far as tribes literally is not what they are. So I just wanted to make that clear. These are nations of people. And even as far as you go back into looking up research on Liberia, a lot of the anthropology that is done on it, especially done by individuals who might have been educated either through a theological seminary or a lot of our so-called scholars, they don't really have what I would consider a strong understanding of the migration. So I did not do any research. I took out some research that dealt with like the original, if they came from a different place, because Africa is an interesting continent. As you know, first off, especially the northern part is a lot of desert, and people have migrated to places that are rainforest for their own, safety, either because of conflicts or war. So if you look at Africa's migration, also look at how Europe migrated. Because I'm sure people can't say that Swedish are originally from Sweden, they came from somewhere. So I just want to keep that in mind. All right, we can go to the next slide. All right. In this nation of Africa, there are about 16 nations. You have the Cape Pele, which is the largest group. Basa, Ma, or Mano, Gio, Dan, Kru, Igbo, Khan, Loma, Gola, Bai, Mandingo, Bandi, Mende, Kissi, Bele, which is also Kua. I should have put that. They're known as the Kua. They're also known as Day One, and the Americo Liberians. Okay, another thing that I want to mention. I am also African American, just to make that clear, not totally Liberian. That is my grandfather and he was a United Methodist minister, and actually started in this area with this conference a long time ago. I would say probably 48, and his first church was in Pennsylvania. And my father's people are ethnically from Liberia. That was my grandmama. She came to Chicago while my dad was pastoring at a UMC there. And actually, that's a beautiful picture. Oh. Here you can see that as she's reading the Bible, as you can see. So we'll go into her tribe and my tribe, which is the Ma or Mano. And for each of these presentations, I have like a distinct mask for that group. So you will have like some kind of, identity of who they are. They live within Nimba County. That is their base. But also, so another thing about this country, just because they have a original point where the people are, they're all over the place. So, but this would be called their home, Nimba. My people are known for arts and crafts. They're gifted musicians, and they're farmers of rice, rubber is big in the area where my dad's people are from, and religious practices are traditional in Christianity. Next is another group that is close by to my people, which is the Gio or Dan. They also live within the Nimba County. Basically known as a warrior society, and they were involved with heavy conflicts with the Americo-Liberians during the time of the colonization of that country. And they farm cocoa and rubber. The Mandingos. This is an interesting group because they're not originally, like all of these groups, not originally from Liberia, and they've traveled to places as far as Gambia, Senegal, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and so forth, without the Western African continent. And in Liberia, they live in 2 points. I wish I could have showed you the map a little bit more, but they live also in Lofa County, which is in the far west. And in Nimba, they're Islamic traders. So and also there's some information that dates them back to the Mali Empire, but sources are kind of skim on that because there's not too much on African history. Next. The Va people live in this county called Grand Cape Mountain, which is in the southwestern part of Liberia, close to the Sierra Leone border, and they're also Islamic. That's not a good picture of the mask, but that was like one of the ones that I could find. This is the largest group in Liberia, the Cape Pele. They live all over the country, but the concentration for them would be around Montevideo, which is basically Monrovia. So they basically live downtown DC, or down, in the capital city. And then they have a lot of other just close-knit counties that they're around. known for growing rice and cassava, and again, the largest ethnic group in Liberia. Through this is George Weah's people, if y'all know who George Weah is. They live in southeastern Liberia. Two counties in general, Some and Grand Cru. The interesting thing about them is the fact that they had the ability to do a lot of selling. They understand the Atlantic to some extent. And it makes me wonder what other traveling they did besides just going through West Africa. So, Bele or Kuwa live in another county which I would consider central. Yeah, well, Bar Polo. Some of these pronunciations are going to be tough for me too, so don't get it. And as you can see, they have a connection to being Christian. There's Islamic people in their group. They practice their own faith, and because there are a lot of nations and also language groups, they consider themselves as crewmen. I don't know so much if they would be considered crew, but again, information on this group is limited.
Is that based on their language?
Yes. Yeah. Kissing. In fact, one of the guys that's running for president is Kissy, this guy named Joseph Boka. And he went to college with my father. So hopefully if he wins, I can go into the mansion. But this group is in Lofa County, which is in the northwestern part of Africa. They're very known for being farmers. A lot of products that they produce, not just cotton, corn, and coffee. Where they're located, it is abundant rainforest. So these people have understanding of the ground, and even in their traditional religion, cows are considered sacred, and they use that for sacrifice. So I thought that was like an interesting thing to mention about this particular group. The Bandi, they also live in Lofa County, and some of the people are within Sierra Leone. They take on Christianity, Islam, and traditional faiths. Loma, interesting group. They live also in Lofa County, farming rice and other things. But I found it interesting that in the 20th century, some missionaries helped them find a way to script their language. And they found out that there are 85 characters. So, you know, some vowels have certain sounds, mostly. I also see it within my father's language as far as different characters. There's probably about close to about 90 something in my dad's language. So yeah, this is, because of the way things are pronunciated, there might not be a O might sound like ooh, you know. So there are ways that they have to split their language. Mende, this is also Western Liberia, lives in Lofa. I wanted to focus on the Port of Sandy societies because those individual societies are basically rites of passages that the youth go through to go into man and womanhood. And some human rights groups feel that the Sandy Society conducts mutilation that should not occur. I can't really say anything on that because that's not my people. So, but for human rights, the body is the body. We have to respect our bodies, and also, you know, you got to think too about ancient practices on how they had to preserve themselves. So that was, you know, a way that they felt that they needed to do. And we know the Mende because of Amistad, one of their known characters is Senke, who actually is from Sierra Leone, where the borders so-called align. So, but a decent amount of the people that were Mende, well, a couple of people that were on that ship happened to be Mende. They or Daewoo live in Bomi County. That is again southeast, closer to Monrovia, and it is not clear on if they are Kru or not. It is believed that they are Kru, but their language background is Kru.
How do you spell Kru?
Kru, K-R-U, Kru.
Thank you.
Igbo. This is another Eastern Liberian ethnic group. They live in Maryland. I'm sure there are some people here in Maryland too. And they live in specific Eastern Liberian counties.
But there's a Maryland, Liberia?
Yeah, there's a, and their county seat in Maryland is Harper, which is, you know, you have a lot of ethnic names within those cities, but it's a coastal county. So I could see how American Liberians could have inhabited that area. Gola. This is also, I believe, former President Salif Johnson's ethnic group. And they live out in southwestern county. An interesting thing about them is the fact that here in the United States, around coastal South Carolina and Georgia, you have this group called the Gula.
Oh.
And they seem to have, there's a belief that there's a connection from this particular ethnic or nation group from that. So, and Islam is practiced with that, and that's probably why Gula is. And Kron, this is a Central Liberian group. One thing that's sad about this group that I did not mention, okay, they're known as farmers and fishermen, Christianity is practiced. But during the first Civil War, these individuals were the ones that were attacked the most. So a lot of them have migrated out of Liberia, and but they're doing. There's still some remnants of them there. And Bassa, a central Liberian group. They cover a large region of Liberia, although they're not a great ethnic group, but their lands mass where they cover is big. And they are known for farming yams, cassava, and plantain. And now we're here to former slaves. And also people who were freed on ships called Americo-Liberians. So they arrived in Liberia from Americans and the Caribbeans in the 19th century. Most of them live basically in the Monrovia metropolitan area. Of course, they established the country, and they consider themselves Congo or Conga people because of the Congo basin, slave trade island. So some of those people that they might not remember exactly where they were, but they considered themselves that because of being in that place. So that is a little about the nations of Liberia within. And are there any interesting questions?
Only interesting questions.
I'm going to ask for you to repeat any question that is asked, because it will probably be easier to pick it up on the microphone.
Okay.
So I will first start with any questions from people who are present in the room, and then we'll see if there are questions on Zoom. And people who are on Zoom, you can put your question in chat, or you can use the electronic. I'm raising my hand, and we will get to you as soon as we can. So starting first here.
Okay. Yes.
How do people, I mean, there's a lot, it looks like there's lots of different groups who have lots of different religious practices. How do they coexist as religious people? Is that a source of conflict, or is it?
In Liberia, from my understanding, I don't think that is a big problem to that extent, as far as, you know, you're not getting fighting that's happening like in Nigeria, so to speak, like in northern Nigeria, or even other sub-Saharan African countries, because a lot of these people have coexisted with trade, and but distinctly the ethnic groups like the Mandingo, for instance, in Nimba, of course, they're going to stick to their own for those practices, but they still know that they have to live within a community with people for trade and stuff. And also there's a lot of diversity within Liberia that people aren't really talking about, as far as people they might live in a strategic area where their tribe or nation is based, but they're all over the place. So, if they're fighting against each other. And I don't think, and two, they're not trying to get to that extreme anymore. There's still more healing because they've been in 2 conflicts in the last 40 years. So they're trying to get away from that, although there is still, you hear stories about lack of police force doing anything, bodies on the ground still, and nobody's doing that. I mean, nobody's picking them up or putting them in funeral homes. You're still seeing that, but I don't think it's at the extreme of, you know, we're having a jihad or no, you know, it's not like northern Nigeria or some other place. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering about the Americo-Liberians you mentioned, whether or not they had their own ethnic identities, or whether once they've been in North America and came back, they kind of lost that and became this new, a new tribal group in a way, and how they were received by the Liberians who had never left Liberia. Was there a lot of tension?
Excuse me, repeat the question.
Okay, the question is dealing with the Americo-Liberians, or the former slaves inhabiting Liberia, and how they were able to coexist with the people. From my understanding, being that my dad's indigenous, I'm going to have perspective from the indigenous. When we go into countries where we have established new borders and place a new population within that area, and they create their own society and try to build, there was some oppression. I'll say that there was some oppression, but I think what has helped within the last maybe 60, 70 years is the fact that the indigenous people have been able to go to London, Germany, the US, Canada, to bring education back into the country. And it is kind of helped balance of power. Like even right now, you have mostly we as people in charge, the crew, which is another issue with having different nations within a border. You don't have a balance of power because certain groups are going to look for their own interests. And luckily, it hasn't gone into fighting this time. Because the first Civil War, first coup was by an ethnic group that overthrew the Americo-Liberians, who were in power for close to 140 years at that time. So, and they want to change. The people want to change. And a lot of that also happened during what we would call the African independence movements that were starting in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Kenya, this sort, because those indigenous people wanted to gain power. So just like those indigenous people within Liberia, they felt that the Americo-Liberians weren't the original, you are not us. So we're going to get ourselves educated. We're going to do what we can to change the society back, into a way where you can accept us and you can be able to cope with it. So yeah, there was some problems with that. Yes.
I was actually a Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia in the early 70s, and very much have a sense about what you're saying about the Americo-Liberians being the dominant class. And the other thing I'm remembering is every nation has its own language.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody there speaking their own dialect. And so then one of the things that happened when the Americo-Liberians came in was to say, well, English will be the dominant, kind of the
Business language,
yeah, that'll be the language. And so that was also, I think, another factor in the development of the country.
Yeah, I would think that would be an issue. I don't really know too much about, because I wouldn't say it would be that big of an issue, but I know as far as how the colonies were constructed, they had to have rules in place, and their rules and orders of their governments were in the colonial languages of different groups, as far as the French, the Dutch, or whatever group that inhabited. And so, yeah, but even with all of the distinct languages, and I want to break something down too, as far as these nations. If you look up history on specific groups, especially like the Ma people, our history for my group so-called comes from Western Sudan, migrating to that part. And languages change. So the original language that these people were speaking, probably like in the 8th century or 6th century, is no longer with them. So, and even now, the Liberian English is different than the Jamaican English or the Sierra Leone English and whatnot. So yeah, language. Any other questions? Yes.
Was slavery ever in Liberia?
Okay,
I'll repeat the question.
was slavery ever in Liberia? Liberians sold slaves. Ethnic Liberians sold slaves. This is the truth. We gave some people away. Sad to say. But I don't think they believed that what they were giving up would turn out to what it became here in the States because of their own servitudes that they might with people helping out. So I can't really say even if that was slavery where they were living, but they did sell people. We did sell. I'm sorry. That's it. So if there are people, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes.
I would like to know what do you think missionaries have done in Liberia? It doesn't matter, Catholic, Methodist, or Lutheran. I lived 6 years in Nigeria, and what I had witnessed there made me, I think missionaries should have never been allowed. It was horrible what they did. And, you're telling girls only to read and write and do hand needlework, but not bringing them to a university education. And there were so many things, and not thinking about family planning, and it was all registered from the church. And I was really, I found it terrible. So I was done with missionaries when I came back to Europe.
Okay,
What is your view on what had happened in Liberia?
as far as missionaries. Okay, the question is dealing with how do I feel about missionaries interacting with the people? First off, I'm gonna say two things. One thing, I am happy for them because missionaries gave my father the ability to have a Western education. So I accept the attempt to build civilized people. I'm gonna go into my little sister's perspective on that. My little sister, she has this business which deals with people who go on study abroad into places that are like Morocco or Zimbabwe or so on and so forth. And when they come back, there's a culture shock. And the thing that she realized by this is the fact that you're also sending people who want to share their knowledge of how to be and help people become like them. You want, I like a hamburger, I like French fries. But if I'm not raised on that and you're forcing these things on me, it's not. We have to figure out ways to interact a little bit better. But I do respect people sharing information because we're a global world, and there are certain things that we can learn from others, like making silk from worms. I want to learn how to make that. So, and a lot of places don't have the ability to, don't know this knowledge. But if you can teach people, and it has to be transactional. We need to be more transactional and not forcing realities on people. Because how can you say that a person is civilized? All right, are there any other? Yes.
Excuse me, this is going to be the last question, I have to say.
So just as the way we practice Christianity here is very Eurocentric, do people in Liberia who are Muslim or Christian incorporate some of their traditional practices into the?
I would believe so, as far as probably even song and worship. There might be ways where they you know, have that distinct. I'm not presently a person that has experience it, you know, but yes, every group, like you can, you know, I've been to even Hmong worships and they incorporate, you know, Laotian type of style worship within their services. So yeah, yeah, even okay, even my dad's people, they are translations of the Bible within that language. So they can learn. And that's it.